Okay, let's be real for a moment. When was the last time that you were having a chilled day, resting, just winding down, your head just suddenly went, okay, we need to worry about this thing that might happen in the future. And suddenly your mind goes on a spiral and it's thinking thoughts like, what if I break up with my partner in the future? What if I'm alone in my future? What if I don't make enough money? What if I hate my career? What if I can't have kids? What if I get really ill in the future? What if I look back in 5 years' time and regret everything that I ever did? If you're stuck in that cycle of future anxiety at the moment, first of all, I get it. Truly get it. And I get it not just from being a therapist that deals with future anxiety, but being a human who experiences future anxiety. So I get it. And second, you're not supposed to have it all figured out right now. You're not behind. And even if your brain is screaming a million what ifs at you about the future, things that could go wrong, things that you need to anticipate and prepare for, I need you to hear me when I say you are going to be okay. All of the unknowns in your future feel like too much right now. They feel really terrifying, then stick around. Together, we are going to unpack why future anxiety feels so intense and how you can stop spiraling today. And most importantly, how to start believing that you are capable of handling anything and everything that comes your way because you are, and that is something that's so important to feel when you struggle with this anxiety around the future. So if this is what you need today, keep listening, keep watching, and let's get into the episode. Hi, and welcome back, or welcome to the Anxiously Capable podcast. I'm so happy to have you here. I'm so excited that you're here watching, listening to the video, the audio, whatever platform that you're on. If you're new here, I'm Jess. I'm a UK-based therapist and I'm a self-confessed anxious girly. So everything I talk about in this podcast doesn't just come from the standpoint of someone who is qualified and understands this from like a professional perspective. It also comes from personal stuff. I bring a lot of my own experiences into the mix here as well, because I truly get what it's like to feel anxious, to feel worried, to have that future anxiety. And it's important to share that. So we've not just got the professional side, we've got the personal side too. So here we talk honestly about what it's like to live with anxiety, to live with OCD, to struggle with your mental health, and basically talking about how to deal with all of the difficult things that life throws at us. Because life is going to throw a lot at you, a lot of difficult stuff. If you're watching this video, you probably already know that. You probably already live through this and experience it all the time. But yeah, life's going to throw a lot of difficult things at you. And we talk about it here. We talk about how to deal with it, how to cope with it, why it's happening, because that understanding is so important. So we talk about the what, the why, the how, and the practical shifts that can take you from feeling stuck, scared, anxious, to actually enjoying and embracing life and feeling capable, because this podcast isn't titled Anxiously Capable for nothing. I want you to come away from these episodes. I want you to come away because I'm feeling capable, because this podcast isn't titled Anxiously Capable for nothing. I want you to come away from these episodes thinking, yes, hell yes, I can do this. I am capable. I can manage these situations. I can handle these difficult feelings, and I can still have a really good life. I can still enjoy life and do all of the things I want to do. So, with that, I'm so excited that you're here, and let's actually dive into today's episode dealing, managing, coping with future anxiety. And as always, with this podcast, a little disclaimer before we get into the episode. Nothing in this podcast should be taken as therapeutic advice or as a replacement for mental health support and mental health care. If you feel you need further support, please reach out to a mental health provider. I always include a couple of links in the description of these episodes on where you can find therapists or where you can find further support. So first off, I thought it'd be really helpful and really important to talk about why we actually fear the future, why we feel like this, why we feel scared, why we feel like we have to anticipate what might happen in the future. So let's talk about why our brains absolutely love to stress us out. And this actually makes sense from an evolutionary perspective, right? So back when we were living in caves and we were cavemen and we had to really just try and survive every single day, thinking about the future, worrying about the future, anticipating what might happen in the future was literally key to our survival. It was the thing that made sure that we stayed alive. Worrying about the future kept us alive. Thoughts like, what if there's no food? What if there's a predator out there? That kind of thinking kept us alive. It's probably part of the reason that you're sat here today listening to this. You know, if your ancestors from like thousands upon thousands of years ago hadn't have had those kind of thoughts around the future and what might happen, then you wouldn't be sat here because they probably would have got eaten by a predator or not found any food or just generally not survived because they weren't prepared. In our modern world, right, we don't need this same kind of thought process, not to the extent that we did in the past. Our brains are applying the same level of life and death future thinking to everyday situations. What if I pick the wrong career? What if I'm not in a relationship by this age? What if I never find my person? And it's a lot for us. Our brains are wired to think like this, but when it's just general day to day things, day to day stresses, not life or death situations, it just leaves us spiraling and constantly worrying. Basically, anxiety helped us. It serves a purpose in the modern world, but when it's showing up in this same way that it did when we were cavemen, it's not helping us like it used to. Anxiety makes us believe that if we think about something enough, we can prevent bad things from happening. It makes us believe that if we worry enough, we will feel prepared, and that if we predict every possible situation or outcome, we will be safe. But the reality is, overthinking and worrying about the future doesn't actually help us control it. It actually makes us feel more out of control and leaves us feeling exhausted, absolutely drained. If you've ever found yourself worrying about something in the future, worrying about your career, your relationship, your health in the future, you will know exactly what I mean by this. That feeling of just being so mentally exhausted, your body is probably full of anxiety, full of adrenaline, because that's what happened when we were cavemen. But your mind is drained. Your head is absolutely exhausted of having to think and consider and prepare for situations that you can't really consider and control. The truth is, the future is coming no matter what. And if that is really scary to hear, the question that we need to ask ourselves is, how can I trust myself to be able to handle what comes? How can I learn to trust myself to feel capable if these situations do arise, when these situations do arise? I've done a full episode on overthinking and I will link this in the description because I talk a lot more about this in depth. So if you want to hear about that, just check the description. It'll be linked below or it'll be somewhere on the screen of this episode if you're watching on YouTube. So now that we know why we fear the future and why this happens from an evolutionary perspective, that it's our anxiety trying to prepare us, trying to help us manage potentially difficult situations, but that it's maybe not proportionate to the worry that we've got, how do we actually calm the future anxiety? How do we actually deal with anxiety around the future? One thing that can be really helpful here is to sort of zoom out on the timeline, right? So if you take a moment to think about a situation maybe 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago that really worried you, something that caused those overthinking spirals, a situation that really triggered a lot of this future anxiety for you, how did it turn out? Maybe it was messy. Maybe it was really, really difficult, or maybe it was fine. And the reason I bring this up is because either way, whatever happened, whether you look back and it was absolutely shit, or whether you look back and think that was awful, or if you look back and think, I actually dealt with that really well, that isn't a problem for me anymore. However, this situation was for you, something that's really important to remember and to recognize is that you handled it. You handled it, you were capable of handling that, and you are here today. You handled that then, and you will handle this too. So, for example, my own situation with this, if I look back over 5 years, if I look back and think about what life was like back then, I had to move back home. I've been living independently for 2 years out of the family home, and for reasons out of my control, I had to move back home. And at that time, I was experiencing a lot of this future anxiety. I was worrying about what this would mean for me going forward, how this would affect friendships. Would I ever feel capable of moving out again? And that future anxiety really set in. What was my life going to look like? And it's flared up multiple different areas of life for me: career, relationships, finances, general self esteem, like everything that I could possibly be worrying about, I was worrying about. And it was always to do with things that could impact the future. And if I zoom out on the timeline and I look back, that was really tough. It was really, really hard. But now I'm in my own property, in a really healthy relationship, really happy, got my dream career. I handled it. I dealt with that. It was awful. I dealt with it and I handled it. And you can do that too. You can look back, find the situations. They don't have to have been good situations. It's just about recognizing that you handled it. You don't have to have handled it in any particular way. So it's just about looking back and recognizing that, yes, you have handled difficult situations before and you can handle them again. Another way that you can start to calm this future anxiety is with the what ifs. Okay. So we know that when we've got that future anxiety, the what ifs go wild. They go absolutely wild. I don't know about you, but if I'm experiencing this future anxiety, my what ifs just roll off each other. They just spiral and become bigger and bigger and bigger and feed into each other. It's like I think of one what if thought and it causes me to think of six more. And then those six cause me to think of six more on top of that. And it's just a constant cycle, constant loop that's really difficult to break. Before I get back to my point, if this is something that you struggle with, then I've actually got a mini guide that talks through this process, breaking it down, some practical things that you can do, some steps you can take to break out of these what if loops, to actually stop these cycles from happening, and also how to deal with that sense of uncertainty. Really practical guidance on that. I will link that down below so you can check that out if you feel you need further support with that. Going back to my point, if your head is going wild with these what ifs, following them isn't going to help. So, thinking of more and more what ifs, it's actually just going to make you feel more confused, more exhausted, more anxious, and less prepared. Even though this is likely happening as a way to try and prepare you, you're going to feel less prepared. You're going to feel less clarity on the situation. So, a different way of looking at this is flipping the what ifs to what is. And what I mean by that is looking at what is happening right in front of you, what is actually happening in the present moment, what is real and happening right now instead of what could be happening. It sounds so small, but when our head is going wild with what ifs, we need to find those ways to bring ourselves back to the present moment. I talk a lot more about this in my episode on overthinking. So, second plug for that episode, go take a listen because that's really helpful with getting back to this present moment. But flipping those what ifs to what is actually happening, what is real, what's in front of you, what you actually have some sort of like tangible control over instead of what could happen. And that nicely leads me on to my next point. If you can recognize what is happening, what is real, what you can actually have some real sense of control over, because control doesn't have to be a negative thing. Sometimes we need that sense of having something that's in our control when we feel so out of control, but it has to be something that's real, something that we can actually control, not the future. So if you can identify something that's real, that's present, that you have control over, take action on that one small thing. Anxiety wants you to solve everything all at once. But what is one small step that future you will actually thank you for in this situation? So, this is a really general example. But if you've got anxiety around the future and a relationship and not having a partner, what's one small step that you can take? One of those might be arranging to go to a local meetup, a local club, or something like that so that you can put yourself out there a bit more. Another small step, getting on a dating app. I know it's really daunting, but that's one small step that you can take, something that's actually in your control. If we think of this in a career sense, for example, if there's something that you want to do, a job that you want to go into, but you're maybe not qualified for it, you've not got the qualifications, then something that you could do is maybe researching and looking up ways that you could do that, ways that you could do that job in the future, local courses, local colleges, local universities, open university, all of those kind of things. That is one small step. I'm not saying that you have to go and apply for these courses, but it's one small step towards doing something about that future anxiety. I want to give you some real examples of what this can look like in life. So, in the next section of this podcast, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some areas where this future anxiety tends to focus on, latch into, get its fingers into. We're going to talk about those big three areas and what you can do in those situations. So, before filming this episode, I put a poll on my Instagram story. If you want to follow me on Instagram, it's at Therapy with Jess Eden. But I put a poll on my Instagram story asking all my followers, all the listeners, what the biggest area of future anxiety is for them, the part of the future that stresses you out the most. And three things stood out: money, health, and career. These were huge. Like, the votes on this poll were off the scale for these three things. So these seem like the biggest areas that this future anxiety really latches into for you guys. And honestly, that makes so much sense. These areas in life are probably the most uncertain. And when something feels uncertain, our brain jumps to the worst case scenario, the what if thoughts, spiraling about what might happen, and just generally worrying about the future. So let's talk about them, and not in a let's fix your life kind of way, because your life doesn't need fixing, but in a let's reframe this so you don't feel stuck in this anxiety kind of way. So, number one, future anxiety about money and finances. Money stress is so real, okay? It's tied to safety, security, our sense of control. And if you don't feel financially stable right now, it's really normal that your head goes to that place of, what if I can't afford what I need? What if I don't have enough money for the future? And if you live in the UK and if you're around a similar age to me, probably even a little bit older, there's a lot of conversations around pensions and what financially the future is going to look like when we're old. And that's a really difficult thing to think about, because it really brings up that question of, what if I can't afford what I need? Because we don't know what we're going to need in the future. When inflation is happening like it has done for the past few years, it does make you doubt and question what the future is going to look like for you financially. So I totally get that. I want to say that you won't be the only person worrying about this. If this is something that is coming up for you, this is a huge worry. So, one thing that's really important here is the perspective that we have on this. Phrases and beliefs like, I'll never be financially secure, are really concrete. They're really set in stone. They're going to cause panic. They're going to cause us to stress. Instead of, I'll never be financially secure, we can see this in a different way. We can see this as, I'm learning about money. I'm learning how to manage money one step at a time. Money and managing money is a skill, right? It's not a personality trait. Some people say that they're naturally good with money, but it is a skill. And if it's something that you've not been taught, that's not your fault. Instead of, you are bad with money, you haven't been taught the tools yet. And that is something, going back to that sense of taking one step at a time, this is a step that we can take. We can't know what the future is going to look like. We don't know how much money we're going to need when we're older. We don't know what the financial future will look like for us. But what we can do is learn how to manage money in the present moment so that we feel a bit more financially stable. And this looks different for everyone. I am aware that there is a privilege in this. Some people do naturally have more money than others, some don't. It depends on your job, it depends on your lifestyle. There are a lot of different factors in this. So pick one small step that you can take, tracking your expenses, setting a budget, setting up an emergency fund. Remind yourself that while your financial situation can change for the negative, it can also change for the positive. And that's something that a lot of these what if thoughts don't actually let us think about, that these things can actually go and change in a positive way, not just a negative way. And remember that future you doesn't expect perfection. Future you doesn't expect you to have millions in the bank. It doesn't expect you to have thousands upon thousands in savings. So taking a healthy control of what you can and trying to shift your beliefs around this. The second one, future anxiety around career. And this kind of links into our purpose as well. Career anxiety is such a big one. Okay, massive. This was the one that came out on top of the poll. And this is especially big if you feel like you're behind in life. This will really show up if you feel like you're behind in your career. Maybe you're in a job that you don't particularly love. Maybe you had dreams of doing something else. Maybe you're seeing your friends move up the career ladder and you're not. Or maybe you're wondering, will I find something that I'm passionate about? Instead of feeling like you're falling behind or you're failing, see this as, I am on my own timeline. Recognize that while it feels like somebody else is further ahead than you, your path is different to theirs. Your life is very different to theirs. Growth and progress aren't always linear. It's okay to figure things out as you go. There's no one right career path. Everybody is taking detours, even if it doesn't look like it. So on the surface, I have my own business. I'm a qualified therapist. That at the age of 25 sounds really big, but I didn't go to uni. I dropped out of A levels. I then went back to study. The reason I'm sharing this with you is because there is no right path. You can look at someone in life now and think, God, they've got it all. They've got exactly what they wanted. And yes, they might have, but they might have had all of that doubt, all of that feeling, taken a different path from what's seen as a standard path at another point in life. So what can you do right now? Zoom out, see if you can look back, see if you can feel that sense of, okay, I've handled difficult things before, I can handle this again. Most careers evolve in unexpected ways. It's very rare that anyone follows a one set path that just goes up and up and up the career ladder. That is so rare. Everybody takes detours. Let yourself take action without knowing the future. Okay, we don't have to know the end goal. We don't have to know what the final step looks like. We don't have to know any of that. We just have to take some little bit of action towards what we want. And that helps you feel a little bit unstuck. That helps you come a bit unstuck without having that daunting prospect of, I'm so far away from what I actually want. So start where you are, try new things, and let that clarity just come with the action that you're taking. Remember, that sense of purpose isn't something that we just have. It's something that's built. It's something that we build through trying different things, realizing what's important to us, what we like, what we enjoy, what we want our future to look like. It's something that slowly develops. It's not typically something that we just suddenly like thrust upon us. And I think that's a bit of a misconception. That purpose is something that we just naturally have within us. It's not. It's often something that we have to go out and find. And finding that passion, finding what you want to do, it's so important. And that can be one of these little steps, these little action points, these little tiny steps that you're making towards chipping away at that future anxiety. And the third and final one is future anxiety around health and well-being. Future health anxiety can be really overwhelming and feel so out of our control. What if I get sick? What if something happens to me? What if something happens to somebody that I love? What if I can't prevent these things from happening? That's an example of what future health anxiety can sound like. So a different way to look at this is probably going to sound really blunt, but it's something that we often need to remember, that worrying about health issues in the future isn't preventing them. It's not going to stop those health issues. It's actually just making you feel worse in the short term, the medium term. It's leaving you probably feeling a lot more stressed. It's not actually helping you prevent anything, especially if you're going round and round in circles with this worry. So, what can you do right now? Focus on what you can: your sleep, your stress management, movement, if that is possible. I understand that it's not always possible for everyone, but movement, if that is possible, strengthen your body, those kind of things. Even if these things seem insignificant, they do add up. Recognize what your body's got you through so far. You know, you're here, you're present in this moment. You might have gone through some really difficult, horrible things health wise in the past, and that is worth acknowledging. But you are here and your body has got you to this point. And going back to what I mentioned earlier, worrying about this right now is just bringing almost like pre-suffering to you. Overthinking that future anxiety around health, it's not actually helping you control the situation. And sometimes we just need to remember that. Sometimes we just need to recognize that worrying about the future is not actually helping you take any action. As we close out this section, here's something that I want you to remember. Future you does not expect you to have everything figured out. Future you doesn't expect you to have all of the answers. Future you doesn't need you to predict every single possible scenario. They actually probably just want you to take care of yourself. They want you to take care of yourself today, tomorrow, going forward, as best that you can. And honestly, that is enough. So, something that really sort of fits into this as well, I feel personally, is regret. A lot of the time, this future anxiety comes from a place of regret. Previous regrets, past regrets, historic regrets, the risk of regret in the future. So I thought that was something that we should really talk about. One of the biggest reasons that we fear the future, that we have future anxiety, is because we fear making the wrong choice, of waking up one day and realizing that we've made the wrong decision, we chose the wrong career, we're with the wrong person. But here's something that's really helped me personally with this: you can't mess up your own life. There's no correct life path, there's no correct way of doing things. If there's no correct way of doing things, then we can't mess it up. It's just life, it's just our life. We're always learning, right? And this is part of life as well. There's no correct path. We just constantly make choices, and every single choice that you make teaches you something. You learn something about who you are, where you want to be, and what you do want your life to look like, or what you don't want it to look like. So if you're stuck in this anxiety, in this fear at the moment, take a breath. Okay, there is no right path. You can't make a wrong choice because there is no correct choice. It's just the next step. So, as we come to the end of this episode, if you're still here, because I think this has become a really long episode, thank you. Please drop a plant, some kind of plant emoji in the comments, in whatever platform you're on. Please drop a plant emoji in the comments to let me know that you've made it this far. And before we do come to an end, we have a little Q&A section. This section isn't going to be huge, just a couple of questions that came up when I said that I was going to be filming this episode. from followers and listeners on my Instagram. So, first question somebody's asked is, I feel so behind in life and it makes me scared for the future. How do I catch up? First of all, you're not behind. Like I said, there is no correct path. There is no right way to do things. So there's no wrong way to do things. And if there's no wrong way to do things, we can't fall behind. It's just our path. Timelines are made up and everybody's figuring things out at their own pace. We're all on our first run of life, depending on your beliefs, depending on like karma and things like that and how you believe. But depending on your beliefs, we're all on our first run of life. Everyone's figuring things out. Nobody has got it all together. Question two, we have covered this in the episode, but how do I stop obsessing over worst case scenarios? I think with this, it's about recognizing that your brain is trying to protect you, but it isn't a fortune teller. It's not an oracle. It doesn't know the future, and it encouraging you to think about it more is not probably going to bring you those answers. If you've clicked on this episode, you will know what that spiral feels like, and you will know that 9 times out of 10, it doesn't actually get you anywhere. I have really covered this in the episode, but you can also take a listen to the episode on overthinking if those what ifs are really strong for you at the moment. And question three, I'm scared I'll regret my choices in the future. How do I deal with that? Your future self doesn't want you to be perfect, okay? I think that's something to really recognize here. Your future self does not expect you to be perfect. They just want you to try. They just want you to give it a go. And it's about those small steps, small actionable steps, and staying in the present as much as we can. Not really going off into those worries, into that headspace, recognizing if we do and coming back to the present and taking those small steps that we can take at the moment. I really hope you found this episode helpful. I know the future can feel so overwhelming, but I want to leave you with this a couple of things to remember when you're feeling like this. You don't need all the answers right now. You are human. You are not an oracle. No one is expecting you to be an oracle or a fortune teller or a future teller. I'm trying to think of the other words. Nobody is expecting that from you. It's not your job to predict the future. You are allowed to figure things out as you go. This one is key. And if you take anything from this episode, I need you to take this, right? You are stronger and more capable than your anxiety is allowing you to believe. You are stronger and more capable than your anxiety is letting you recognize. You are stronger and more capable than your anxiety is giving you credit for. No matter what happens, you will handle it like you always have. So take a deep breath. Future you is going to look back at this version of you and thank you for taking those small steps, for keeping going, even when it's scary. So, as we come to the very end of this episode, I just want to say thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. If you are listening on Spotify, just to let you know, there is a video with this episode. It's literally just me talking into a mic, but you can watch that. You can watch it on Spotify or you can watch it on YouTube. So you can watch it on either of those. And yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the episode. Did anything stand out to you? Has anything really connected with you? I would love to hear from you. So drop it in the comments, send me a DM. I always love getting messages from listeners. That always means so much to me. So please let me know what you thought of the episode. And you can let me know if you've got something that you particularly want me to speak about for a future episode. Feel free to send me a message. On Instagram, it's at Therapy with Jess Eden, or you can follow the podcast directly at Anxiously Capable Podcast. But yeah, come see us over there, and new episodes are released every Monday. So follow, subscribe, do all the good things that mean you will get notified about Monday's episodes. I will see you next week. Thank you for listening. Bye.